From the very early planning stages of this shop build, I knew I wanted to incorporate some smart features that would not only future-proof it, but also make it easier to work in. So I thought I'd walk you through what I've done, what I've got planned, and how you might be able to incorporate some of these features into your own shops. Because enough technology can even make idiots like us look smart. This video is sponsored by Narwal. The first challenge I knew I needed to solve was to get internet into the shop. Technically, the shop is only about 15 feet from my house, so my first thought was, why don't I just run a long Ethernet cable through some conduit? Before we get this final slab poured, I decided to add some conduit to run an Ethernet line from our house. I was quickly scolded by the Geek Squad in the comments, who informed me that this was in fact a terrible idea. Something about differences in grounding between structures. It turns out that Ethernet cables are just copper conductors and transmit harmful charges between structures, so if my house gets struck by lightning, the shop stuff gets fried. Have I mentioned I'm not the most tech-savvy individual yet? They said that running fiber, which are very thin strands of glass, which do not conduct electricity, was a far better option, and it sounded better, no doubt. But how the F do you run a fiber? Rather than ask ChatGPT, like any sub 40-year-old would do, I went old school and basically resorted to the encyclopedia of the internet, Google. After an hour-long search, I paid $250 on some random website for a pre-terminated fiber line. With my questionably spec'd out spool of bright yellow fiber secured, I whipped up a little spool mount in my basement. Let's see you do that, AI. Once that was done, I got to work trying to then fish it through about 120 feet of 1-inch conduit, which, by the way, running this conduit 6 months ago was the only intelligent thing I did, and you'll see why in a second. As I started trying to fish this through, I very quickly learned two things. One, I needed a longer fish tape, and B, lube is your friend. And don't be chintzy with it either. Glob it on there like you're drowning some nuggets in Chick-fil-A sauce. This yellow foamy lube is meant specifically for pulling wire, and it did make the job a lot easier. At least I thought so. I got the wire pulled up to this open end of the conduit and figured the hard part was done. The last little bit through the shop would be a piece of cake. So I weaseled my way underneath the stairs because naturally I thought this was a convenient place to run the conduit, and I found myself having to pull really hard. Like definitely way too hard, but I pulled a little bit harder just to be sure. That's when I went back outside to check on things and discovered, yeah, I broke it. It had snagged on a corner of this L-box and my overzealous pulling yanked the ends right off the fiber, which is just a real bummer because you can't fix that. Or at least I definitely can't. Defeated, I went inside and promptly shelled out another $250 for a new fiber line. The second go around went much smoother, and once I got it all hooked up, I realized that that fiber line didn't work. It turns out there was this small break towards the end that I'm guessing is the culprit. At this point, I'm $500 in and no closer to surfing the web. So I elected to go cheap for the next one, only $76 on Amazon, and wouldn't you know it, that didn't work either. Yeah, no idea why. Actually, I was way more careful and thought I was in the clear. Maybe it's just a bad cable from the beginning. Should have probably tested it first. So back to the Amazon I went. This time I went for a $99 option with armor. For those keeping track at home, this would be attempt number 4, and I'm now almost $700 in the hole. Convinced this was my last try. Really, I was really hoping this metal protective layer would help keep it safe as I pulled it through the conduit. And before I did anything, I did test the fiber this time and it tested out perfect. For some additional insurance, I also opted to get my own pulling eye, which felt like this was way more secure and spread the load out better. So I crossed my fingers and held my breath. All right, they say fourth time's the try, right? Let's hope. What I'm gonna do different this time is I'm gonna pull the opposite direction. So I'm actually gonna pull back towards the house. I was normally pulling to the shop. I've opened up this little box, I don't know what they're called here. So we're gonna feed it gently in there, make sure there's no kinks or anything. And then I'm gonna be underneath the deck over there, pulling very gently, hoping that, I don't wanna buy another cable. I can't buy another cable. The first step is always lube, lots of lube. Then with the help of my wife this time, we started gently feeding it through the conduit backwards towards the house. Okay, so I'm just gonna pull gently. We took our time and didn't force anything. I learned that if I'm grunting while pulling this cable, I'm doing something horribly wrong.
I feel nothing on my end.
Pull it back towards you. Sure enough, after a couple of tense moments shared through FaceTime, we got the cable through. Okay, That had to be, come on. There's no way that broke.
Cross your fingers.
If that broke, I give up. We just won't have internet. How much is Starlink?
Oh, whoa!
I know that slug.
I know.
All right, the fiber line for our house comes in up there. So I've got the fiber end here. So just please work. So this little media converter here converts the fiber signal to the Ethernet, which is going to the internet router thingamajig. So if all of these light up green when I plug in this fiber, we're golden. We got all green lights. Yes! Just wish it didn't cost $1,000. God. I'm embarrassed to say how long this took and how many stress-induced nights I had thinking about this stupid fiber cable, but we now have Wi-Fi in the shop. Hallelujah! Enough stupidity though. Let's start making this place smart. This little closet under the stairs is going to be the central brain of the shop. Everything is terminated in here, the fiber line, all of the Cat 6 cable, even the speaker wire. But as you can see, it's just studs at the moment and a complete disaster. So I need to get it cleaned up and usable without, you know, breaking the fiber in the process. Okay, much better. You can see I've got plenty of outlets and a couple of shelves in there for all the various doohickeys and thingamabobs that are gonna live in there. And I've even got a little access hatch down below in case I ever need to get back where that fiber comes in and fix anything. Which, speaking of that, let's go see if our internet still works. Once that little green light came on, I knew, whoo, we still got it. Now, it wouldn't be very smart to leave all my wires looking like this, so let's take care of that next. That looks a little bit better, right? You can see I've got all of my Ethernet lines terminated in the back of this patch panel, and I've got little patch cables going to the network switch, or just having devices connect directly to the network switch. Network complete. See? Not too bad for a tech noob, right? You don't always have to outsource this type of stuff. But you should do yourself a favor and outsource keeping your floors clean with a robotic vacuum and mop. Yes, I said mop too, but this is some space age tech. The new Narwal Flow 2 has legitimately changed our household. We've all seen robotic vacuums, right? Those were cool like 10 years ago. But this thing is nuts. Starting with its dual RGB cameras that can not only detect obstructions, but also recognize and then decide what they actually are. That's right, it has an AI brain to figure out what it is and then tailors its approach accordingly. So if it sees a table, it gets as close as possible to clean, but will maintain a larger safety buffer away from pets or other high-risk obstacles. So instead of treating everything the same, it actually decides how to clean around it. It can even go so far as to entering an ultra quiet mode around baby cribs and even timid pets. Crazy, right? But that's just the beginning. It can also analyze the type of mess it encounters in your home too. So a dry mess is treated differently than a wet mess requiring mopping. And the flow wash mopping feature might be the coolest thing. Instead of the little spinning brushes, it's got this rolling track mop that utilizes a clean heated water system and a separate dirty wastewater system. So as it cleans, it's pumping fresh hot water and producing 12 newtons of downward pressure to really scrub those stubborn messes, while simultaneously cleaning that rolling track mop head. Oh, and the entire system actually extends out from the side, allowing it to clean right up to an edge, which is genius. So you can finally enjoy peace of mind knowing your robotic cleaner is gonna take care of whatever it encounters instead of before wondering if it got stuck in the fireplace again. Ask me how I know. Step into the future and check out the new Narwal Flow 2. It's the next evolution in home automated cleaning. That's one less thing you gotta worry about. Check out the link in the description below. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so that closet is really the start of the infrastructure or the brain of what this whole smart shop is gonna run on, but there are two more pieces of tech I need to add first. The first is a NAS, or Network Access Storage. It's basically a small computer with a bunch of memory in it. And I know a NAS isn't the most obvious choice for a workshop, but stick with me. It's gonna serve three basic functions. Number one, it's gonna be where all of my security footage is stored. I'm gonna add some cameras around the shop and they will be where they all tie into. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Number two, it's a place to back up my data. I actually already have two NASs, mainly for making videos like these. I have one just like this in my house, and I have a remote NAS at my editor's house in Utah. Everyone say hey to Colby. And this is actually how we transfer large video files back and forth. We have a synchronized folder that basically mirrors each other, so if I add footage into a folder, it appears in his folder too, and vice versa. So this NAS is just a backup storage for critical files in case one of those NASs fail. But reason number three is actually to be able to easily send and store files I may want or need in this shop. Think designs for 3D prints or vector files to use in my laser, things like that. And I know not everyone needs a NAS in their shop, but for me, it's gonna make my life a whole lot easier. And the last infrastructure tech is this smart hub. Now I'm using an old Samsung SmartThings hub, but there's lots out there to choose from. And this is the command center that all of my smart devices are controlled by, which we'll get to in a bit. So all of that in this little closet is basically the brain of this shop that we're gonna build off of. And the next big piece is what I'm gonna call security and awareness. Security composing of cameras in my case. And I've got these Synology cameras I'm gonna be strategically placing around the shop to keep an eye on things when I'm not here. So let's go get those hooked up. Luckily, I made sure to run plenty of Cat 6 PoE capable line. That's power over Ethernet, so I can actually power these cameras too. I have one line run to the front corner of my shop by the entry door that also faces the pool area, so I thought this would be a good placement to keep an eye on the backyard and all the things around the pool. Then I ran another line to the other front corner of my shop, which faces the driveway and the garage of my house. So this is gonna give me a great view of everything going on around there. Then finally, I have a line run in the ceiling here, which will give me a panoramic view of inside my shop, including the main entry door. So again, I can keep an eye on things when I'm not here. So now I have a view of both the outside of my shop as well as the inside.
Jesus Christ, that's Jason Bourne.
And I do plan on adding at least one more camera, especially upstairs, to keep an eye on the 3D printing area, but I'll have to add that later. Now, I call this security and awareness because I plan on using a couple of different smart sensors to monitor things that I can't necessarily see with the cameras. And the first is a water leak monitor. This connects to my smart hub and will send me an alert if it ever detects water. So you can think of some places where this would be handy, right? Any place where you don't want water or suspect water might leak in the future. So think underneath sinks, maybe under an AC drip pan, or maybe even under a water heater. Another sensor I think is very good to have in any shop is an air quality sensor. And these are pretty cheap and give you real-time readings that you can keep an eye on. In a wood shop, the particle count numbers are especially important. You can see that there's 3 different levels for particle size: 10 micron, 2.5 micron, and even 1 micron. And this is going to tell you right away if you've got lots of potentially harmful airborne particles floating around that you probably need to take care of. You also may want to keep an eye on the VOCs when you're doing any kind of finishing work in here. Finally, the last sensor I'm going to put in place is this multi-sensor. This thing actually measures 7 different things: motion, light, temperature, humidity, UV levels, and even vibration. Once you connect this to your smart hub, you can use it as a trigger to perform all kinds of actions if you want. Like if you detect motion, you can turn on a light. Or if the temperature gets too cold, it can kick on a heater. You can really tailor this however best suits your shop's specific needs. Maybe you do lots of 3D printing like I do, and you want to make sure that the humidity levels stay low, so you can set up an alert or action if it gets above a certain level. There are obviously Lots of other sensors and security options too, like smart locks on doors and even door sensors to tell me if a door has been opened. For me, this is going to evolve over time, but even just having these basics in place gives me peace of mind knowing my shop is at least being monitored at some level. And the next group of smart tech is around power and switches. So the gateway drug for a smart home is a smart switch, right? Pretty basic, easy to install, and you can get things to turn on and off with an app or even voice control. But did you know that you don't necessarily need to replace the entire switch? Check this thing out. This is a smart relay switch that you wire into your device, but it lives behind the switch itself. What's cool about these is that you can use it to turn basically anything on and off, and you can use your existing switches. From lights to garage doors to fans, even power tools, as long as they're within the ratings of the device, of course. And there's a couple of different types too, like this one for controlling 12 or 24 volt LEDs, and this one for monitoring power. So I've got a couple of these relays added to some lights in and around the shop to start, but I'm already thinking of really cool ways to use these in the future. Let me know what you think. Automating things like lights around your shop does a couple of things. First, it just makes your life easier. Imagine walking into your shop and just having everything come on. Or in my case, having smart switches turn on special lights for filming. But another thing is using them to make sure lights get turned off too. I always find a way to leave my upstairs light on, but now I have a smart relay connected to one of those multi-sensors that turns the light off after a certain amount of time without detecting motion. Pretty cool. The last potentially useful tech I'll mention in this category is power monitoring. If you're worried about how much power your shop is using, either while you're actually running tools or even how much is using just sitting idle, you can get these really cool smart monitors that install right in your panel. Now, I might do this in the future because our pool equipment is powered through the shop, and I'm always curious to know how much juice it takes to keep the pool going. And now that I've got my new big old dust collector installed upstairs, how power hungry that thing really is. So definitely worth looking into in a shop environment. Speaking of dust collection, I can't really mention shop automation without at least touching on that. Dust collection is only good if you use it, and you're most likely to use it if it's easy. Automating dust collection around your shop is a great way to do that by automatically kicking on the dust collector when you're using tools. And there are obviously levels to this. The most basic level is a switch like this. Now this is just a regular remote switch. So you plug in your dust collector or your vacuum into this and it's just triggered by a handheld remote. Now nothing triggers this to come on, but it does prevent you from having to reach in here and flip it on yourself. So I've got this in my workbench because I don't typically use tools that I want to trigger this with, but I've got the remote in this drawer that I can use to turn it on and off when I want to do cleanup or just do a simple job with a router or a sander or something. Now, the next level up would be a switch that has two outlets, one for the tool and one for your dust collector. When the switch detects voltage from the tool turning on, it creates a small delay and then turns on the vacuum or dust collector. Super easy to use, especially with something like a miter saw or a sander or a track saw. And I've actually used these a bunch in the past, especially in a miter station. And these two can also work with the handy remote if you just want to use it for manual operation. A similar option would be to use a dust extractor with a built-in switch, like the Bosch I've got sitting under my miter station. Every time I use my miter saw, I don't have to think about turning on a vacuum. It just turns on after about a second after I turn on the saw, and then it stays running for about 6 seconds after I'm done, which is key. But you can, of course, take it a step further and add sensors to all of your big tools too, like the table saw, maybe the bandsaw, that turn on a large dust collector automatically. And of course, the final boss of dust collection automation is to add automated blast gates that open and close based on what specific tool you're using. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm thinking about adding that in the future. Not all smart tech has to serve a specific purpose or be completely utilitarian either. Like, I like listening to music or podcasts when I work, and I don't like wearing AirPods all the time. So when I was building this shop, I made sure to run speaker wire in the ceilings. And now that the closet is done, I can finally get those installed. Luckily, I made sure to take pictures of where all the wires are run, but after finding them and cutting out the holes, it was easy putting in a set of 4 flush-mounted speakers. Do I need 4 for this space? Who knows, but it certainly can't hurt. Then I went back to the closet and terminated the speaker wires into the wall jack, and now after hooking up my new Sonos amp to it, I can control everything from my phone. This alone has made such a huge difference in making this shop more enjoyable to work in. But sometimes I also like to watch YouTube videos while I work. So on this feature wall, I mounted a TV, and it can swivel in any direction depending on where I am in the shop. This is yet another creature comfort that has nothing to do with being smart, but has everything to do with improving the quality of life in here. Man, that looks like a lot of work. Now, you probably know I'm a big fan of shop organization, right? Having things in known places so that they're easy to find is key to being really productive. But no matter how many cabinets and drawers you put in your space, it seems like we all need to resort to the dreaded storage tote at some point. Every shop space I've ever had has them. I recently put in some shelving in the upstairs of my shop specifically for totes. After I built this place, I had so many different thingamabobs left over that I just couldn't part with and needed a place to store. So after getting these long shelves installed, I filled them up with clear totes grouped with similar items, hoping it would help keep everything nice and visible. I have totes for electrical, for plumbing, painting, even caulk. Totes are a great catch-all for things you might not need as often or for maybe bigger or bulkier things, but they're also a place that things go to be forgotten about, even if they're clear. So the next best thing is to digitize them with smart labels. These are pre-printed QR codes that you stick on the outside of these storage bins, and then you document in an app what's inside of them to whatever level of detail you want, including pictures. So now instead of rifling through totes until I find what I need, I can do a quick search in the free app and narrow it down. Now this is one of those things that's only going to be as useful as the amount of time you initially put into it, but so far I really like it. So whether you have clear totes like I do or one of those viral walls of black totes, you can digitize your stuff so it's easy to find later. And that's kind of smart. Finally, the last thing I did was use my new clean closet space to store and charge all of my camera equipment. Before, this was sitting out in the shop covered in dust, which is definitely not ideal. But now it has a clean, dedicated spot with plenty of outlets for charging. That is all neatly tucked away in here. So those are just a couple of ways that I've made my shop a little bit smarter. And I'm not claiming to be an expert by any means. Just go watch the first part of the video. Just what I did in my shop. I do feel like though, once you start going down this rabbit hole of smart tech, it turns into an endless evolution. There's just so many things you can add and integrate and automate, but there does come a point where it just turns into automating for the sake of automating. So I'm gonna try to stay practical if I can. But hopefully this helps you maybe make your shop a little bit smarter or avoid what I did altogether. Either way, you're smarter for it. See ya. Oh, and pursue shop greatness. Yeah.